the Haftarah of Parshat Shmini. The Haftarah of Parshat Shmini is the story of how David HaMelech wants to bring the Aron Kodesh to Yerushalayim, and there's a story of Uzzah, who doesn't treat, in inverted commas, the Aron Kodesh in a proper way. And parallel to that is the story of Nadav Avihu. And that's why Chazal joined the Haftarah of the story of Uzzah to the story of Nadav Avihu. But, and here's the big but, this story is recorded twice in the Torah, in the Nevi'im. Once in Sefer Shmuel, and once in Divrei HaYomim. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do a comparison between the two. And what I've done is, in front of you, is the story in Divrei HaYom, story of Shmuel, how Ezra Sofer, which is quite amazing, records this story in a slightly different way. You can see in front of you that for many times each sentence in Shmuel, there's explanation in Sefer Divrei HaYomim. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to introduce it in the following fashion. So in Sefer Shmuel, it's written, Yakom vayelech David. And I'm not going to speak about the order, because there is a difference in the order of incidents which takes place in Shmuel to the incidents which, the way it's recorded in Divrei HaYomim. But we're not going to deal with. We're going to deal with, in actual fact, the story itself. Okay, David HaMelech now has fought against the Plishtim. He's managed to unite all the Jewish people together. And what happens is, Vayakom vayelech David b'chol ha'am asher ito mibaalei Yehuda, all the people with him, la'alot misham et Aron Elokim, because as we know, the what's it called, the Aron Elokim is not in Yerushalayim. It is in another place, which we'll discuss in a minute, which is in the next pasuk. Let's just go down. And it's a place called Bet Abinadav Asher Begiv'ah, the special house which Abinadav, which Shaul puts it there after the Philistines, after the Plishtim, the Aron was returned. But David HaMelech says, let's read the most important statement. Vayakom vayelech David b'chol ha'am asher ito mibaalei Yehuda, la'alot misham et Aron Elokim, asher nikra Shem Sham, Hashem Tzvakot, Yoshev Kruvim Malav. And there it's called the name of Hashem, and the Kruvim sit on it. That is the Aron HaKodesh. Now, what's very interesting is the way it's written in Divrei HaYomim. Because in Divrei HaYomim, we have it in a far deeper way. And he says the following. Vayivaetz David in Sarei Alafim B'Yameot L'chol Nagid. David HaMelech gets advice. He sits down with a representation of all the Jewish leaders of the Jewish people. Vayomed David lekol kal Yisrael, umin im alechem tov. If it's good for you, umin Hashem Elokeinu nifretza, and from Hashem our God, the time has come, it's been broken. Nishlecha al acheinu hanisharim b'chol artzot Yisrael, v'imahem hakohanim v'alviim b'arei migrushehem v'yikavtzu eleinu. Let's send messages to all of the Jewish people in wherever Am Yisrael are living, and they should come to us. Why should they come to us? V'naseba et Aron Elokeinu eleinu, and we will bring the Aron of Hashem to Yerushalayim. Why? Ki lo durashnuhu b'yimei Shaul. Nobody even cared about it in the days of Shaul. That means David HaMelech wants to fulfill this vacuum of uniting the Jewish people together and uniting the Jewish people to the Aron. That's what he wants to do. And what does he say? They say, "Vayomru kol ha'kahal la'asot ken." Everybody agreed with it. Ki yashar hadavar be'einei kol ha'am. Now, Ezra Sofer wants to portray to us the greatness of David HaMelech. He doesn't do things alone. What does he do? Ezra Sofer tells us that what really happened is David HaMelech uniting the people around the Aron Elokim. And it carries on and he says, Vayikahel David et kol ad Yisrael min Shichor Mitzrayim, from Shichor, which was near Egypt, Va'ad Levo Hamat, until Levo Hamat, which is approximately in the middle of Syria, Aleppo. All the Jewish people all around, La'avdi et Aron Elokim mikiryat Ye'arim, to bring the Aron Elokim from Kiryat Ye'arim. Kiryat Ye'arim nowadays is Telstone. That's where the Aron was. And they have to bring it now to Yerushalayim. Vayar David b'chol Yisrael ba'alata el Kiryat Ye'arim. And all the Jewish people come up to Kiryat Ye'arim asher liYuda. La'alot misham et Aron Elokim Hashem yoshev kruvim asher nikra Shem. Right. That is the introduction. Now, what's quite amazing is the following. When we learn, and we've already spoken about this, we have to look at the Tanakh not as one book, Shmuel, Divrei Hayomim, but it's deeper than that, because we have a fascinating Tehillah, one of the Tehillim, which describes the feeling of David HaMelech. And the feeling of David HaMelech is brought in Sefer Tehillim. Now, let's just read in line number 10, the Malbim. And the Malbim says the following, and we'll read this Shir HaMalot together. Perek Kuf Lamed Bet. It's one of the Shir HaMalot, which is towards the end. Shir HaMalot. Hashir Halaz, this specific Shir HaMalot, Nityached al et shechnisu et Aron lebet kodshei hakodoshim. This Tehillah speaks about how they took the Aron HaKodesh into the Bet Kodshim. V'nechalek nechlak legimel chalakim, and it's divided into 3 portions. What is it? Be'et shalchu v'nas'u et Aron baderech, how they took and carried the Aron on the way. Yomar HaMeshorer, the person who wrote this poem, which we'll see who it was in a minute. Zechor Hashem leDavid, remember God, David HaMelech, et kol anuto, all his affliction. Shu masar nafsho al zeh. David HaMelech writes about his personal feelings, how I live in Ir David. And where's the Aron HaKodesh? It's not in Yerushalayim. And now we'll read what David HaMelech says about it, how the Shir HaMalot portrays his personal affliction. What does he say? Line number 5. Tehillim Perekuf Lamed Bet Aleph Tzechet. Shir HaMalot. Zechor Hashem leDavid. Remember Hashem to David. Et kol anoto. All his personal afflictions, his emotional feelings. He felt persecuted because he was living in a house and the Aron Hakodesh was stuck somewhere in a little tent. And what does he say? Asher nishbal Hashem. He made a shvuat HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nadar, he made a vow. La'abir Yaakov, to the mighty one of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Im avo be'ohel mati, beiti, im ale al eretz yitzuai. I should not come into my tent, my house, or I should not go to bed. Im eten shnat le'einai la'af apat numai, I shall not give sleep to my eyes and slumber. Ad emtza makom l'Hashem, until I found a place of Hashem. Mishkanot la'abir Yaakov, a dwelling for the mighty one of Yaakov. Kinei k'manua be'Ephrata. Behold, we heard it in Ephrat, that's Beit Lechem. Mitzanu b'stei Yar. Navo ala mishkanotav. Let us go to his tabernacle. Nishtachabel adom raglav. Kuma Hashem limnuchatecha. Arise, Hashem, to your resting place. Ata va'aron uzecha. You and the ark of your might. Now, it's very interesting because we'll see now the play on the words which happen to uzecha, your might. Because in the story, we will see that the person who really has mysterious nefesh in a mistake was also called Uzzah. But here we see David HaMelech, the way the Malbim portrays it, David HaMelech's feelings that he can't sleep at night. He can't sleep at night. He can't go into his house. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu hasn't got a house. The Aron HaKodesh hasn't got a house. So what am I going to do now? And that's what he says, Ata v'Aron uzecha. The Aron, the most important piece of furniture which exists amongst the Jewish people, is just at the moment an Aron. It's like you've got a piece of furniture, the most important, expensive piece of furniture, and it's outside, somewhere hidden. And David HaMelech feels that this, I can't sleep at nights when I think of this. So therefore, what does David HaMelech do? 1 minute, Harold. So David HaMelech says, let's get together, all the Jewish people, because all the Jewish people, it's not my private Aron. It's everybody's. Since it's everybody's, we've all got to decide how to go about it. That is introduction.
Rabbi Taylor.
Okay, now questions. Yes, Harold.
Yeah. First of all, can you mute everybody?
I can mute everybody. I'll give 1 minute.
Mute them.
Yeah. 1 minute. Hold on. 1 minute. 1 minute. Mute all. Right. Okay. Then you can't speak, Harold.
No, I can unmute. So forgive me.
Then, right.
Forgive me for my what was the Aron doing in Kiryat Yearim?
What was it doing? The story was, we learned about that a few months ago.
Yeah, I guess I forgot.
Yeah, okay. Then what happened was that the Aron was captured in the first battle with Eli. And the Aron was taken to the Plishtim. The Philistines captured it. And what happened was that the Aron miraculously started breaking down all the tzlamim. It's in Perek Zayin in Shmuel Aleph, Perek Vav Zayin. And the Philistines realized that they can't hold the Aron. And all of a sudden, Am Yisrael see 2 oxen schlepping a wagon with the Aron on it. And they don't know what to do with it. And they decide to put it in Bet Avinadav in Kiryat Yearim. That's what it's doing there. Okay? They don't have any other place because they're scared. They don't know what to do with it. Now, David HaMelech is aware of this. And what does David HaMelech say? And that's what's recorded in Divrei Hayomim, because that's exactly what it says. Look in Tzuk Gimel, on the side of Divrei Hayomim, Harold. V'naseba et Aron Elokeinu eleinu Ki lo drashnu bimei Shaul. Nobody's been looking after it in the days of Shaul. Nobody really cared about it. So David HaMelech has got a certain criticism on the Jewish people about David, about Shaul. Nobody even dealt with it. Right. Now, let's go back to Sefer Shmuel. We'll carry it, we'll deal with it. Okay, yes. Yaakov, who can I, 1 minute?
Yes, I wanted to clarify. David HaMelech built his house in Yerushalayim, and during that time, apparently he didn't, or at least we don't know, his thoughts about the placement for the Aron itself. So after he has basically established his home in Yerushalayim, it's like an afterthought that he said, what about the Aron now?
No. He had to buy a place. I'll explain to you what the problem is. David HaMelech, and we spoke about it in a long time ago, David HaMelech sits with Shmuel, and he receives from Shmuel the plans of building Beis HaMikdash. Right, that's number one. The first thing he has to do is he has to make what's the word? He has to make his appearance that Yerushalayim belongs to him. Okay? He's got to take ownership. The first thing he does is that he goes and lives there. He builds his house there. You understand? Because that's a sign of ownership. Okay? Right. He had to fight against the Yevus. You spoke about that 4 weeks ago. He fights against the Yevusim, the Pischim and the Ivrim, and he captures Yerushalayim. He then puts his tent there. He has a temporary house there. That's the way he feels. Okay? And he says, I'll read you out 1 minute, which is important. Sorry, 1 minute. And exactly what you said before was the following. It says here, even before he buys the Aron place, it says, David HaMelech in the next chapter, which we might do next year, I haven't decided yet. It says here, David HaMelech sits, and now I've got the Aron Hakodesh near me, but it's also in a tent. That means the whole time David HaMelech worries that there's his appearance in Ir David, but the Aron HaKodesh hasn't got a house. So the first thing he has to do is to bring the Aron Kodesh to Yerushalayim. The next thing is he plans the Beis HaMikdash, which he doesn't build eventually. But that's the way David HaMelech thinks. Okay, Yaakov?
Okay.
Right.
So he always had in mind a permanent place for the Aron before he basically settled himself in Yerushalayim.
Exactly, 100%. 100%. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Now, what happens on the journey? On the journey, I'm reading from Sefer Shmuel. They put it on a brand new agalah. And they carry it from Beit Avinadav asher b'giva. Ve'uza ve'achyo b'nei Avinadav, and the children of Avinadav nohagim et ha'eglah chadasha. They are the ones who are driving it. Vayisa'u ben bet Avinadav asher b'giva im Aron Elokim, ve'achyo holech lifnei Aron, and his brother walks in front of the Aron. So therefore you got the wagon, which was driven by Uzzah and his brother. The David, B'chol Beit Yisrael, and David and all Am Yisrael mesachkim lifnei Hashem. They're all dancing in front of Hashem, in front of the Aron. B'chol atzei broshim, with pieces of wood. Uvekinorot, that means atzei broshim are like musical instruments. Uvekinorot, violins, nevalim, harps, tupim, drums, umenaanim, v'tzalzalalim. It's like you're bringing in nowadays, we have taking a Sefer Torah to a shul. That's what they're doing. They're all dancing in front of the Sefer Torah. Vayavo, they come, ad Goren Nachon. It's a place called Goren Nachon. Vayishlach Uzzah el Aron Elokim. And Uzzah, what does he do? He grasps the Aron. Vayochazbo, and he holds it. Kishamtu abakar, because the two oxen slipped. So what does Uzzah do? Uzzah, in actual fact, saves the Aron Hakodesh from falling. Vayicharaf Hashem be'Uzzah. Hashem was angry with Uzzah. Vayakeu sham Elokim al hashar, and Hashem smote him on the rock. Vayamot sham im Aron Elokim. Vayichad leDavid, and David was very angry at Asher paratz Hashem peretz be'Uzzah, that Hashem actually spread out his arms be'Uzzah. Vayikra lamakom hahom peretz Uzzah ad hayom hazeh. Vayira David Hashem, and David feared Hashem bayom hahu. Vayomer, and he says, Ech yavo elai Aron Elokim. How can the Aron come to me? V'lo avad David la'asir ve'et Aron Hashem ad Ir David. And Hashem didn't want to, and David HaMelech doesn't want to take it to the Ir David. Vayatehu David bet Oved Edom Agiti, and he puts it in the house of Edom Agiti, where the incident took place. Vayeshev Aron Elokim bet Oved Edom Agiti shlosha chodoshim. Vayevarech Hashem et Oved Edom vet kol beito. Now, that's the story in Sefer Shmuel. Let's compare it to Divrei Yomim. It's more or less the same. But what's interesting is the following. The following, you can read the same thing, but it's going to take us too long to do it. And David HaMelech says the following. In Divrei Yomim, sorry, I want to go back to Shmuel, Pasuk Yud Bet. Vayugad lemelech David, le'mor barech Hashem et bet Oved Edom, bet kol asher lo, b'avur Aron Elokim. David HaMelech gets told that all of a sudden, this Oved manages to, Hashem blesses him, and he has enormous investments, in inverted commas, which are so successful. And he realizes, David HaMelech, that it wasn't that Hashem doesn't want to get to Yerushalayim. It was some small mistake on behalf of David HaMelech. And what happens? Vayelech David, vayal et Aron Elokim beibet Oved Agiti Ir David b'simcha. Now, let's look in Divrei Yomim. Parallel. Perek Aleph, Divrei Yomim Aleph, Perek Tetvav. Vayaslo batim be'ir David. David HaMelech prepares houses, a house in Ir David. Vayachen makom le'Aron Elokim vayet lo ohel. As Amar David, then David HaMelech says, Lo laset et Aron ha'Elokim, kim halviim. Ezra Sofer tells us there was a mistake of David HaMelech. Who should hold the Aron Elokim? Not the children of Avinadav, but the Levim. Kibam bachar Hashem laset et Aron Elokim u'lesharto Adonai. Now, so therefore, David HaMelech's mistake is that at the outset he didn't get the tribe of Levi to carry the Aron, but he left it in the hands of the children of Avinadav. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to analyze, Imit Hashem, the mistakes of David HaMelech here. And the first one who opens up this story is the Abrabanel in line number 15. V'zachar. Okay, line number 15. And it mentions, the Abrabanel says, Shaya David v'chol Yisrael mesachkim lifnei Hashem. They're all dancing, b'chol minei kli zemer. Ubevo'am, and when they arrive at Goren, Nachon, Shamtu Bakar, v'Uza chashav she'yipol Aron me'al ha'agala v'shalach yado bo. And Uza thinks that all of a sudden, that Aron will fall. And he stops it from falling. והקהל יתברך חרה אפו ויקהו על השל, רוצה לומר על השגגה אשר שגג. Uza made a mistake. לפי ששגגת תלמוד עולה זדון. You make a mistake, it's as if הקדוש ברוך הוא is מדקדק עם הצדיקים כחוט השערה. וזהו אמרו וימת שם אצל ארון אלוקים. He dies next to the Aron. That means to say there was something holy which Uza does, but there's a mistake in it. Now, what are the mistakes? Ubemaaseh hazeh, and in this action, hayu arba pshiot gdolot, 4 big mistakes. The first one, line number 20, ha'achat. K'fi ha'torah nisat ha'aron haya mutal al Levim b'katef. We learned it in Parshas Bamidbar, that Levim have to carry it on their shoulders. כמו שנאמר עבודת הקודש עליהם בכתף יישאו. ולכן היה מהחטא העצום במה שהרכיבו אהרון על עגלה חדשה. They made a mistake by putting it on an עגלה, because the Aron has to be carried. ובמדבר סיני רבה, אמרו שהיה החטא בזה, ושאחיתופל תפסול לדוד בזה, and Achitophel, who was one of the advisors of David, said to him, ואמר לו, היה לך ללמוד ממשה רבך, you should have learned from Moshe, your teacher, שלא נשאו הלוויים את אהרון אלא בכתף והוא האמת. כי אם היות שעשו הפלישתים זה, even though the פלישתים sent the Aron and העגלה, לא היה אצלם ידיעת התורה והמצווה, they didn't know the Torah, אבל בני ישראל להתנהג על מנהג פלישתים, ועזבו את תורת השם, ולא הביאו אהרון כפי המצווה, היה חטא עצום. Right, so the first thing is, don't copy the Plishtim. Even though the Plishtim sent the Aron and Agala, you don't follow them. That's mistake number 1. Mistake number 2, Hashenit, line number 27. לפי שגם הלוויים לא היה להם ליגע בארון אלוקים. Also the Leviim never touched the Aron. ולא היו נושאים אותו בעצמו ונוגעים בו. יישאו במוטות. They carried on poles. ולכן היה מפשע אם נגעו הלוויים בעצמות הארון, בכל שכן שאר ישראל. And also the Plishtim, also the Leviim aren't allowed to touch it. And here Uzzah touches it. השלישי, מיוחדת בעוזה, שלא היה לוי, ולא היה לו רשות לאחוז בארון אלוקים. כמו שאמרו, כל הקרב אל המשכן השם יומת. הרביעית לדעת חכמינו, כי חטא עוזה במיעוט אמונה. Uzzah didn't have enough emuna. B'choshbo, when he thought, she'yipol ha'aron arza. He thought that when the oxen slipped, the Aron would fall. V'hinei mi'et lefi machshavto b'kedushat ha'aron. Shelo yachol la'amod ba'atzmo b'lo noseh. He thinks that the Aron Hakodesh won't manage to stand without somebody holding it. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Nos'av, Noseh Aron atzmo lo kol sheken. Surely the Aron can be able to stand by itself. V'liyoto bilti boteach b'Hashem, since he didn't believe in Hashem properly, ubilti ma'amin b'ashkachato b'Aron HaKodesh, ne'enash b'mita. He got punished. Even though he made a mistake. Even though he made a mistake. He should have had emunah, and nothing will happen to the Aron. וכבר יורה בזה ממה שאמר בדברי היומים, אז אמר דוד לא לשאת ארון אלוקים כי הם הלוויים, כי בם בחר, etc., etc., etc. Right. Now, after all these mistakes, what did David HaMelech think? What did David HaMelech think? Well, David HaMelech wasn't aware of these things. What was his mistake? Now, what we're going to do is, we're going to try to analyze the mistake of David HaMelech in two ways. One of them is by the great Hasidic Rebbe, the Shem Shmuel, and the other one is the Vilna Gaon. Two amazing directions of how to understand this story. Now, in order to understand this, we've got to go back to the story of the Nesiim. What's so special about the Nesiim? The Nesiim actually donate agalot to the Mishkan. Right? Now, they never got a commandment to donate this. So the Shem Shmuel says the following. Kavanat HaNesiim, sheikrivu agalot laset et hamishkan. They donated agalot to carry the Mishkan. Shelichora eino muvan. Shemeachar shelo nistavu al agalot. Since they were never commanded, al ken hakavana ita laset hakol bakatef. All the parts of the Mishkan were supposed to be carried manually. V'im ken, hanesiim chashvu ligroa min hamitzvah. The Nesiim lowered the standard. Because if the first mitzvah, the way it's written in Sefer, in Parshas Bamidbar, no agalot are mentioned there. How are they supposed to take everything? By hand. That is the mitzvah. Right? Let's give ourselves an example. A lulav and esrog has to be taken by hand. It's not allowed to have a chatzitza. You've got to carry it. All the avodat in the Mishkan have got to be done by hand. So they should have carried it, and yet the Nesiim carry it. Give agalot. Why? And he says the following. U'komoshe bivnei kahat shayta mitzvah be'emet laset bakatev. The David HaMelech שהרכיב את ארון אלוקים בעגלה חדשה, נאמר כי לא דרשנו כמשפט. We didn't learn it properly. So what did the Nesiim think? Right. Nesiim think the following. ונראה, כוונת הנשיאים הייתה להמשיך קדושה אפילו לדברים נוחים. Nesiim felt that every single creation has to have some connection to Kedusha. Afilu behemot yareh aleim ruach Kedusha. V'al ken, and therefore, lo iskinu aparim, Chazal say that those parim who carried the, the Klei HaMishkan never got older. V'al ken mishum HaKedusha shesharta alehem. V'zeh haya petach. שתזדכך הנפש הבהמית של ישראל. The body of a human being, the physical body of the human being should have Kedusha. עד שיהיה ביכולת כל איש ישראל, that every single one of us should what? should להגיע עד המדרגה הגדולה, עליונה. כי הנפש הבהמית שלו לא תעכב. Your physical body won't hold you back. באשר הוא כולו קודש, כמו שהעניין לעתיד במהרה בימינו אמן. וזה היו יכולים לעשות רק הנשיאים, כנודע. שנשיאים הם בכתר, etc., etc., and therefore it's written, ובזה מדוקדק כפל השום ויקריבו הנשיאים ראשי בית האבות. So what happens here? Says the Shem Shmuel. In actual fact, the agalot are there for, what's it called? Are there in order to uplift everybody. And therefore, why does David HaMelech put it on an agalah? In order to sanctify. On the journey, we are now going to sanctify every single piece of wood and every oxen, because the whole objective of the Torah is to enhance Kedusha in every dimension. Domem, the silence, the wood, the chai, the animals, domem, tzomeach, the vegetation, chai, umedaber. And that was the reason why David HaMelech agrees at the beginning to put it on an agalah. And he feels that every single one of us, even Uzzah, should be able to drive it, because the minute he's driving the agalah, he himself becomes enhanced in Kedusha. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us, don't change more, don't expect more Kedusha. Just like Nadav Avihu going to Ketoret, because they feel they want to get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They want to get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why they go and sacrifice the Ketoret. And what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu tell you? No. It's not for anybody to go inside and offer up Ketoret. No. They're barriers. They're parameters. Only a Kohen who's been chosen can go in. And Rabbi Avihu wasn't chosen. Only Aron HaKohen. And you think that you can touch the Aron Hakodesh and sanctify everything? No, not the Aron. The Aron is something else. So therefore, the Shem Shmuel, David HaMelech wants, in actual fact, in his first initial stages, that every single one of us should be able to touch the Aron. Because that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. That was the plan of the Nesiim, that everything should become Kodesh, everything. And that turns out to be the mistake. It's not about actually pshia. It's not transgression. It's not that you do an avera. You're doing a sin because you wanted to get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what David HaMelech feels. And that's why he takes, let's go back to the beginning. How does Divrei Yomim enhance? Divrei Yomim speaks about how David HaMelech includes every single person into this going up. He takes advice from everybody. But unfortunately, you don't look at the consequences. Are we there yet? Okay? Are we there at a time when we can enhance Kedusha in every single thing and David HaMelech gets shaken? His life gets shocked because he realizes that we're not there yet. We're not in the dream of the Shem Shmuel that the Agalah gets Kodesh and the cows get Kodesh and the human being is Kodesh. No. Right. That's explanation number one. Yes, Harold.
Oh, well, I was just thinking that this custom of kissing the Sefer Torah.
Yeah.
Okay, or touching it as it walks by. Maybe we shouldn't be doing that.
True.
And especially these people that I find to be highly inappropriate, that then kiss it with their mouth, and which is a practice that I react viscerally against. Maybe we shouldn't be doing it. Maybe if you're a Kohen or a Levi, maybe you should be able to touch the Sefer Torah. But everybody else, we should maybe hands off.
Okay, I'm not. Listen, everybody will have his own perspective from this concept. True, however you feel. I'm not saying. Okay. There's a very famous story, Harold, of the Vilna Gaon, that the happiest day of the Vilna Gaon was Simchas Torah, when he used to dance with the Sefer Torah. And that's exactly what it was. Only the Vilna Gaon can really feel the kedusha of the Sefer Torah. Okay. Anyway, but that is statement number one. David HaMelech's dream to uplift the Jewish people. Let's go now to the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon has a different thing, different perspective. The Vilna Gaon says the following. His Perush on Divrei Hayomim, he says the following, line number 60. Az amar David, Hainu, ki bitchila, hashav David ha'amur, בכתף עיסאו, לא נאמר, אלא לדור המדבר, שהיו ראויים לישא בכתף, כי הידע כולם קדושים ודור דיה, ובדורו אין ראוי אלא לישא בעגלה. The Vilna Gaon says the opposite. We are not worthy to carry the agala. David HaMelech thinks we're not worthy of it. Just like Harold said, we're not worthy of kissing the Torah. We're not worthy of carrying the Aron. And therefore, what's better for us to do? Put it on an agala. Nobody touches it. Okay? Now, Aval Kshera'a Peretz Uzzah, when David HaMelech sees what happens to Uzzah, then he realizes that what? That the mitzvah of the Leviim carried the Aron still exists. Because nobody is allowed to touch it and besides the Leviim. Avok Shera'a Peretz Uzzah, Azamar lo laset ki malviim ulushato. We've got to keep the Torah as it is. Nothing changes. So therefore, David HaMelech thinks that the period of carrying the Aron is just at a time when the Jewish people are at their pinnacle. We're not there yet. So David HaMelech doesn't look. So according to the Vilna Gaon, there are two sides of the coin. Was it to uplift the Jewish people? And that was the concept which the Shem Mishmur speaks about, and Divrei and the Gros says just the opposite. It says, no, we're not worthy of it. We've got to put it on an agala. That's what it should be. Okay, because we're not worthy of carrying it. Those are the two ways of looking at the story of Peretz Uzzah. And what happened? Let's carry on. Here's the following. Now, David HaMelech gets scared. Vayira David et Hashem bayom hahu. Line number 80 in the Malbim. Perush. David avad tamid me'ahava v'simcha. David HaMelech's avodas Hashem was always b'simcha. That's what he believes in. Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha. And what does David HaMelech do? Is he bearing the Aron or is he dancing in front of it? There are two ways, guys, of treating a shul. Do we treat it in fear or do we treat it b'simcha? Chasidim Mulitvaks. Yekkers versus Chasidim. The Yekkers believe in the shul, everything has to be in fear, orderly. Chasidim, simcha. And David HaMelech's perspective is simcha, says the Malbim. Va'avada kazot tarik al ba'alea shefa hachesed v'arachamim tov v'simcha. And this way of worshiping Kadosh Baruch Hu creates kindness, etc. What happens? Va'ata, on that day, bayom hahu, shecharad mipachad ha'onesh. David HaMelech trembles at the fear of the punishment which happens to Uzzah. Nafal mimadregat ahava. he falls down from the madrega of loving to the madrega of yirat ha'onish. Every single thing which I do, I have to be scared of punishment. Shi madrega pchuta. Okay, there's a very famous story of the Baal Torah Tmima, who was learnt in Volozhin, and he had his uncle, the Netziv, and his other great Rosh Hashiva, the founder of the Brisker dynasty, the Beis HaLevi. And the Torah Tmima tells us of the two different Sdarim which he went to. The first night, Pesach, he goes to Reb Chaim's father, Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik. And Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik only eats 2-3 zaitim of matzah because he's scared of chometz. That's all he eats. He never ate matzah if he didn't need to, because he always lived in fear that perhaps the matzahs weren't baked properly and might be chometz. So therefore, he minimized the amounts. That's avodas Hashem of yirat ha'onish. The next night, he goes to the Netziv, full of avas Hashem, chesed, eat as much matzah as you want. You're keeping the mitzvah. Two different perspectives. David HaMelech's perspective was always chesed, was always ava. And all of a sudden, he realizes that an avera immediately has its repercussions. And David HaMelech gets terrified. And what happened? Says the Malbim. Says the Malbim, Al Ken Amar, line number 86. Ech yavo elai Aron Hashem. How can the Aron come to me? I'm not worthy of it. I'm scared. I'm scared now. I can't think of it. Im ba'asher hirgish ki nafal mi madregato. Perhaps he'd gone down in his madrega. Im ba'asher ra'a shemitnaheg im makarev el Aron uzo bedin v'pachad. That anybody who behaves in the Aron has got to be full of fear. V'chol hakarev el kedushato, and anybody who goes near him, yumat. And David HaMelech is scared stiff. Perhaps we should leave it in somebody's house, and that's it. And nobody can go near it ever. If I bring it to Yerushalayim, what's going to be? I don't know. Can we bear the thought of having the Aron in a public place? Is it correct? That is David HaMelech's dilemma now. Right. Now, let's go back to the story. What happens now? What happens now is quite amazing. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows, let's go line, Suk Yud Bet. Vayagid lemelech David lemor barech Hashem et beit Oved Adom v'chol asher lo. David HaMelech sees the opposite. Says, Nachon, you do one Aveira, but if you treat the Aron Hakodesh in its proper way and respect, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives brochos b'lisof. Within 3 months, this guy made investments and he became a multimillionaire. That's what he read. And David HaMelech realizes it's not avodat Hashem mir'ah, avodat Hashem b'simcha. Yeah, it's avodat Hashem b'simcha within the parameters which HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us. And that's why it's written in Divrei HaYomim, in Pasuk Bet. Az amar David, lo laset et Aron Elokim ki malviim. We don't do cheshboinus anymore. We don't think whether it's good, whether it's Torah Midbar, whether it's this, whether it's that. You keep the mitzvah as it's written. And what's written in the Torah? Levim carry it. Levim carry it. Finished. Don't start doing cheshboinus when it comes to mitzvahs. What is good, what is time-wise, etc., etc. Nothing to do with it. Ki bam bachar Hashem laset et Aron Elokim l'shato ad olam. Again, what does he do? Vayakel David et kol Yisrael el Yerushalayim. And David HaMelech gathers all of Am Yisrael to Yerushalayim, la'alot et Aron Elokim el makomo asher echin lo. Vayesof David et bnei Aron ve'et Halviim. And David HaMelech now gets together the tribe of Levi and the Kohanim. And now what's written? Vayikra David letzadok uleviatar Kohanim וללוויים לאוריאל, עשיה ויואל, שמעיה ואליאל ואמינדב. ויאמר להם, אתם ראשי אבות ללוויים. You are the families of the Leviim. התקדשו, sanctify yourselves. אתם ואחריכם. ועליתם את ארון השם, אלוקי ישראל אל הכינותי לו, to the place where I've gone. כי לבראשונה, לא אתם פרץ השם אלוקינו בנו. Because we've now come to realize that it wasn't just Hakodesh Baruch Hu did it stam. Ki lo drashnu kamishpat. We didn't learn the story of carrying the Aron correctly. David HaMelech realizes this is a mistake. Vayitkadshu haKohanim v'Halviim. And the Kohanim and the Nevi'im sanctified themselves. La'alot et Aron Hashem Elokim Elokei Yisrael. Vayis'u bnei HaLevi'im et Aron Elokim kasher tziva Moshe kidvar Hashem bikteifam v'motot aleihem. And where did they carry it? They carry it from Kiryat Ye'arim to Ir David. That's what they do. Now, Vayehi. Now I'm going back to Sefer Shmuel. Hitzadu nosei Aron Hashem shisha tza'adim. Every time they took 6 steps, Vayizbach Shor Mari, David HaMelech offers up korbanot to thank Hashem for these 6 steps. He wants to get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The David Mecharker b'chol oz lifnei Hashem, and David HaMelech is dancing the whole time, and he's wearing an ephod bad. The David b'chol Yisrael, Beit Yisrael ma'alim et Aron Elokim v'truah uv'kol shofar. Vaya Aron Hashem ba'ir David. And they all arrive in Ir David. Let's compare it to Divrei Hayomim, which is even a greater way of looking at it. ויהי דוד, פסוק כ"א, ויהי דוד בזקני ישראל ושרי אלפים ההולכים לעלות השם ברית השם מן בית העובד בשמחה. ויהי באזור האלוקים את הלוויים נושא ארון ברית השם ויזבחו 7 פרים ו7 אלים. ודוד מקר בחור בעל במיל boots, he wears a special type of coat, a בקישה. וכל הלוויים הנושאים את הארון והמשוררים וחנניה השר המסע משוררים ועל דוד אפוד בד. וכל ישראל מעלים את ארון ברית האלוקים בתרועה בקול שופר וחצוצו ומצרתיים משמיעים בנבלים וחרות, ויהי ארון ברית השם בא עד עיר דוד. It arrives in עיר דוד. So then, this is the story. And David HaMelech, what does he do? In Sefer Shmuel. ויבואו ויביאו את ארון השם ויציגו אותו במקומו בתוך האוהל. אשר נטע לו דוד, he puts in a special tent. ויעל דוד עולות לפני השם ושלמים. ויכל דוד מעלות העולה והשלמים. ויברך את העם בשם אלוקי צבאות. דוד המלך blesses them. ויחלק לכל העם, and he divides to all the people, ישראל מאיש עד אישה לאיש חלת לחם אחת, a loaf of bread, והשפר אחד, and a what's it called, and a bottle, and ashisha achat, vayelech kol ha'am ha'ish lebeito. And let's just read in Divrei Hayomim, which is even more beautiful. Pasuk Daled. Vayiten lifnei Aron Hashem min alviim meshartim. He puts there shomrim, להזכיר, להודות, להלל Hashem Elokei Yisrael. Now in front of the Aron, there'll always be people praising Hashem. Divrei Hayomim, which is written by Ezra, compiled by Ezra, takes us to a far higher emotional status. That's the objective of Ezra Sofer. Ezra writes Divrei Hayomim to teach us different additional perspectives. What did it mean to have the Aron? It's just not that it stays there, but he's very particular to write, Vayiten lifnei Aron Elokim min alvim meshartim ulazkir lehodot leelokei la'alel l'Hashem Elokei Yisrael. That is the story of the Aron. And here we see the connection between the mistakes of Nadav Avihu, the mistakes of David HaMelech, how unfortunately David HaMelech, for all different reasons, some positive, some negative. And the mistake in the common denominator between the mistakes is that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands us a mitzvah, Bakatef Yisau, don't start doing cheshboinus. Why, where, how? The minute a person starts doing cheshbonot, why, where, and how, a mistake will take place. And David HaMelech realizes that, and that we cannot afford to start doing all different cheshbonos, whether there might be cheshbonot of kedusha. I want to uplift the world, or looking at historically. No, this haftarah, this chapter teaches us how we have to keep the words of Hashem kithtavam ukilshonam, and that's what Ezra Sofer teaches us. He's preparing the Jewish people when they come back by Sheni and all the Galuyot afterwards, how we have to look at mitzvahs. Shmuel teaches us the story. Divrei Hayomim teaches us how we prepare, and we have to look at the Torah in historical perspectives and emotional perspectives. That is the story of David HaMelech here. Okay, Imit Hashem, next year, I haven't decided what we're going to do. I might move on to Shlomo HaMelech. We've given 13 shiurim on David HaMelech. Okay, we could carry on learning Sefer Shmuel, but I feel that we need to move on in history a bit, and therefore I'm thinking of doing with you Shlomo HaMelech. Imit Hashem, if that's okay with you. So then we've learned Yoshua, Shoftim, Eli, Shmuel, David, and we'll move on to Shlomo. I wish you all a good holiday, and some kal, and keep well. Kol tov.
Thank you, Nechemya.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care. Bye-bye. Regards.
Thank you very much.